Excelsior!
Comic books. What do they have that keeps the reader interested and obsessed with them? Amazing stories, great characters with flaws, and unforgettable moments. These moments have changed the lives of many and inspired so many people to join the comic book industry. But there was one person that did all of this, and his name was Stan Lee. He has inspired others to imagine and create their own universes. How did he do that? Well, let's start from the beginning. Stanley Martin Lieber was born on December 28, 1922 in Manhattan, New York. As a child, he loved to read. Everywhere Lee went or ate, he would not stop reading his book. He would admire wonderful stories such as Tarzan and Sherlock Holmes. But the question is this: who made Stan Lee the way he was? Lee said that it was the late Australian actor Errol Flynn. Others say that it was someone or something else.
The way that Stanley was, how he was based on his life, how he grew up. He grew up in a small apartment and then developed this comic book series that we grew up in and now know as Marvel and as the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It made him who he was. It grew his career and made him connect with people younger than us and made it more relatable, more connection than any comic book I have ever read.
I think Stan Lee was inspired the same way like most other like famous creators were, by their families and friends, mainly because there's probably a time that he was down, not sure like what he wanted to do in life, but I think his parents and those close to him were the ones who motivated him to push past his limits and to create a new type of story or characters that no one has ever seen before. And I think the world really benefited from that.
When he was 14 years old, Lee was so inspired by the stories that he read, he wanted to become a writer. He got his wish in May 1941 when he wrote the third issue of Captain America at Timely Comics, which became the company that we know today, Marvel Comics. As his talent of storytelling grew, so did his imagination, and this was the beginning of a huge impact that would continue forever.
Stan Lee's contribution to the world was more than just his comics. His comics were, of course, a big part of it, but in it he had a lot of inspiring messages. Like, for instance, the X-Men. It had more than just mutants and superheroes. It was a lot about standing up for disenfranchised people, and that while they were born differently, while some people would call them freaks and try to cure them, they were still humans. And of course there will be bad apples in the bunch, like Magneto and his crew, but there will always be bad people in every group. But to lump them all into the same group would be illogical.
Stan Lee left a huge impact on the world. He showed that heroes don't have to be these always good or always this one way or another type of people. They could be just flawed individuals who either had abilities, had knowledge, or some other thing that allowed them to do what they did as a hero.
Lee's career began to skyrocket in the early 1960s when he began collaborating with other comic book creators. These creators that Stan worked with at Marvel were Jack Kirby, also known as the King of Comics, and Steve Ditko. Together, they created the greatest superheroes of all time that everyone loves and worships today. With Kirby, they created the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, the Avengers, Iron Man, Thor, the Hulk, Ant-Man, the Wasp, Nick Fury, and Black Panther. With Ditko, they created Doctor Strange and his greatest creation that people recognize him as being a legend for is the Amazing Spider-Man.
Stan Lee, I believe, became a legend since when he started writing the Fantastic Four comics and also the X-Men comics, and then since then he's really shown his growth through the different characters he's showcased and even new characters he's starting to bring into the cinematic universe.
These characters would become worshipped and idolized by many fans from all over the world. Lee would inspire upcoming comic book creators such as Rob Liefeld, the creator of Deadpool. Then, when Hollywood started to make Marvel Comics into live-action films, Stan Lee's life was about to change. This started the path to making unexpected cameos in Marvel films, including video games.
Love seeing you two together again.
Then, in 2008, Marvel Studios was about to release Iron Man, starring Robert Downey Jr. and produced by Kevin Feige. Feige was also inspired by Lee's work in the Marvel comics, so he decided to make his creations to go on the big screen. Feige was heavily impacted and inspired by Lee's ideas, and it also inspired everyone.
I think that a lot of people worship Stan Lee as an inspiration because a lot of people seem to really look up to him and they want to be him. And I think that's definitely caused a lot of motivation towards other graphic designers or even fans that definitely idoled him as an individual growing up, and now they want to actually, become a part of that universe and even a part of the comic industry that Stan Lee grew up upon.
I think a lot of people are inspired by what Stan Lee gave to the world because he always you may think it's kind of like he created these cliche superhero stories, but he did create that whole with power comes great responsibility, and not many people always remember that. They always tend to use their own power to their own advantage and not to use it to help others. And I believe it was because Stan Lee created this ideal that a lot of people take it within themselves to try and do the right thing.
Then, on November 12th, 2018, the world lost a titan, a legend, and an icon that would leave them shocked.
Breaking news in the world of Hollywood, an American icon, comic books, has passed away. Marvel Comics co-creator Stan Lee, the brains behind Spider-Man, Black Panther, the Fantastic Four, has died. He was 95.
Stan Lee would leave his amazing legacy. Comic book fans of Marvel and DC will never forget everything that he has done for all of them.
Where I was when Stan Lee died, I was honestly packing to go home for a Thanksgiving break to go see my family. And I will say, it hit me pretty hard. Even as a DC fan, Stan Lee was a huge inspiration to a lot of comic book nerds. He's the reason that comic book nerds aren't really looked down upon anymore. And his death hit me hard, and I had to basically stop packing and lay down for a little bit. He was a great person.
I was actually in the dorm watching Deadpool and other Marvel movies, and I just remember hearing about that through the news that Stan Lee died, and I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is terrible. This is just a shock, to the world, and I think to myself, because I've always loved Marvel ever since I could remember. And just hearing about this legend that created this whole entire cinematic universe was definitely a shock to me.
Stan Lee was truly an inspiration to everyone around the globe.